What does inclusion mean to you? We talk about it in the equality, equity, diversity, inclusion space all the time. And often one of the things I notice when I talk to leaders is that the reference point of inclusion is quite different. So I'd be really interested, Savi, perhaps if you could start us off. When you think about inclusion, what does that mean to you?
I think inclusion for me really means, considering everybody's unique experiences and identity, understanding more about that and challenging yourself to sort of understand it. If you're not aware of, how to kind of, bring a cross collaboration of experiences and people from different backgrounds together into a conversation. It's also about kind of, it's bigger and broader for me beyond kind of just, your background and your ethnicity. It's also about kind of, people who come from kind of different kind of, locations, cultures, age, as well as kind of intersectionality as well, and bringing them all together and really addressing kind of how can we champion the way so that people can see more of themselves on social media, in the media as well, across different brands, represented, through who they are, and really sort of showcase and celebrate that individuality that people bring across.
Thank you so much for that. And Corey.
Yeah, we actually have a pretty formal definition. And so, we define, first and foremost, diversity as kind of your unique characteristics and your skill set and your experiences and all the things that make you who you are. And it's not only your gender or your race or your sexual orientation, but it's, again, your past work experience. It's how you've moved and navigated through the world, all the things that you've learned. That makes you diverse because it's probably a lived experience that's different than someone else. The inclusion is in the workplace. How do you make all of that diversity work, right? How do you tap into the uniqueness of an individual to leverage and make a better experience in the workplace? So whether it is your age or whether it is your gender or whether it's the fact that you went to a particular school and learned a particular skill versus someone else's education, upbringing, and background, it's the languages you speak, all of that can be leveraged by an organization if that organization thinks about these differences in an inclusive way. How do we embrace all of that and find value in it rather than devaluing difference? And so, when we think it's exactly what Savi said, it's how can I show up at work being who I am and all the things that come with me, and the organization actually include me in the conversation around business and how to make the workplace better.
Mm-hmm. And I think everything that you were both just saying that really resonated. And I think that point on tapping into is such an important point, and the distinction between valuing, not devaluing, and creating an environment, because inclusion is not just around creating an environment where employees are also able to perform at their best, but where you're creating an inclusive environment, actually you're, as a business, as a collective, going to make the most and make better decisions, be more creative, all of the things that we know that research just shows us time and time again. I found it really interesting when I was really early on in my HR career, and I was spending a lot of time, I was living in Asia and in India, and how so often businesses, large multinational businesses with tens or hundreds of thousands of employees, were making decisions pretty much every decision by 6 people that looked pretty much exactly the same, that had exactly the same lived experience. And you had this melting pot of knowledge and different experiences that actually could only add, in my view, value. And I think we have made, this was 20 years ago, we have made progress since then, but still that there is just so much to, as you said, Corey, to tap into if we really, really get this right. My next question is very much focused on the fashion and beauty industry. And for you both, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges when we're talking around equality, diversity and inclusion as it relates to the fashion and beauty industry? Corey,
Savi, I'll let you go first. I was going to say ladies first. I'll let Savi go first.
Okay, Savi, if we can go to you first.
Yeah, sure. I joined the industry at a time when I'd already had like a 15-year career outside of the fashion industry. And when I kind of came in, I used to work backstage as a makeup artist. I would see people who were very different from me. They didn't look like me, they weren't my skin tone. And I used to wonder to myself, where is the Indian model that's going to walk on that runway? Where is the other sort of black model or the Chinese model or whoever it is? I saw a spectrum of models that were all very similar. And as a makeup artist, I wanted to be inclusive. I wanted to be diverse in my offering. And so, I used to look at brands and go out there shopping for products that allowed my kit to be diverse and to be able to cater and serve a clientele that was inclusive of everybody. There was a time back then where I couldn't get those makeup products. I couldn't get those foundation colours. And so I would come back home and I would create my own little palettes at home, trying to sort of, bridge that gap that was missing in the market so that when I did go backstage and whoever sat on my makeup chair, I would be able to cater for them. Over time, I've started to see there are a diverse range of models that are coming onto the runways. I'm seeing that in the media, and that is a great kind of experience. And for me, as an Indian, born and brought up in the UK, that's great for me to see. For my children to also see that somebody like them is also represented out there. So I think we've made a big kind of step change in that. I think for me now, where the challenges are, and from my own personal experience, I think we need to embrace much more around kind of, not just seeing a demographic, which is a certain age in the media. I think, everybody brings a different kind of life experience. I'd like to see the mature model being represented out there much more. I'd like to see that on kind of social media. I'd like to see that on the front cover of a magazine. I'd like brands to have them in their advertising. I think we've made strides in kind of the offering in terms of products and, Fenty, for example, that's the first one I'm going to think of, right? When they came up with their makeup range and their foundation-based range, as a makeup artist, I was delighted that I didn't have to go home and start creating my own little palettes together and try and sort of bridge that gap. When I saw other brands like Live Tinted come along from Deepika Mutiala, and, she was catering for a market, and, one of her first videos that came out was her putting red lipstick underneath her eyes. And that video had almost like 10 million views because she was showing how for that skin tone you could cater and you can kind of, apply makeup that went with that base. So I think we've made great strides along the way. I think now for me, I think the big challenges are around how do you kind of incorporate a more diverse range of role models out there that feel inclusive for the new generation to kind of see and a maturer kind of audience being represented as well.
Mm-hmm. And I want to come on to you, Corey, but it's something that you said there, and so that really kind of prompted another question was this point around kind of more mature models, more mature representation. Because I was just thinking as you were talking, actually, if I just think of my own experience as as we get older, actually our ability to spend more, whether that's on beauty products, whether that's on clothes, often increases as we become older, but yet we're represented less within that. And it's why is that? I'm sure there's a lot of psychology, a lot of reasoning around that. Corey, maybe you can kind of answer that a bit as you're coming on to your answer. But I'd be really interested in that, because still now I think it's very, very rare that we do see much in terms of age diversity.
Yeah, I mean, Sabi raised all the points I would have. I think, first to one of the points that you raised earlier, Joanna, I think the decision-making process within a lot of this industry is still very homogenous. It's still a handful of people that, are all from a particular or specific background, and I'll leave it at that, profile, if you will. And yet the world has changed and demographics have changed. And not only has our internal workforce changed, but our customers and consumers have changed as well and grown and evolved. And so, I think our brands are realizing that they have to now appeal to even if it's not wider, a more diverse audience, right? And then, there are still tons of challenges to the point around ageism. I mean, one of our other big challenges is adaptive fashion for people with disabilities, right? And how are we going to cater to that audience, which is a wide audience? There are over 1 billion people on the planet with some sort of physical disability. And so we haven't really quite leaned into that demo and really tried to figure out how to curate items for them specifically. As it relates to age, though, you're right. I think in certain areas of the business, we figured it out. It's funny, I was having a conversation with our marketing department at Parfums Dior the other day, and, Miss Dior, the perfume, is really designed for a younger woman. Yet J'adore, everybody knows the brand ambassador is Charlize Theron, and she's been there, and we've seen her, age beautifully, age gracefully, and she is still, she is more now a mature woman, and she fits that brand, J'adore, perfectly. Yet they would never consider her for Miss Dior, and so it's interesting how people can become very siloed in what the marketing and branding looks like, and then there is a very hard pivot to get people to change their minds around some of that. And that happens across all of our brands, right? We think we understand who our demographic is. Maybe it's 18 to 34-year-olds. Therefore, someone 50-year-old could possibly never. I mean, they were 34 at one point, right? And so they've matured and grown with the brand. And I think that's what we talk about with all of our brands. It's really about how you engage with someone at a certain point in their life, and then the loyalty allows them to grow and evolve with the brand. And if you're tapping into that correctly, then they will stay loyal and they will stay with you over time. And so even as, we talk about, the in-store experience where someone walks into our boutique, we're having issues here in North America around racial profiling and the like, and that happens globally. That's an awesome branding moment to gain somebody and gain a new customer. What they experience when you walk into one of our boutiques, it's important that they feel welcome and they feel valued and they feel important. And then they will stay with you long term. Every time they come into that store, they feel special, right? So whether they're 20 years old and they haven't quite figured out their fashion sense yet, or they're 50 years old, that's a moment to gain somebody and hold on to them for life. And so all of that is something that needs to be factored in when we're thinking about what, our customer experience actually is.
No, and that point on customer experience, and as you're saying, that opportunity, and how you connect the whole customer experience, right from being in person, but also then the online piece, and I think something as well that you were both kind of alluding to is, I think we often have assumptions that if we're marketing to a certain demographic, you have to have that demographic marketing. You know, there seems to be, and actually, to both of your points, is that necessarily the case? And as you said, you know, someone was 34 beforehand, but also actually there's something around, I think, the importance for consumers now is that for many, many consumers, and, you know, for a lot of the work that we do, it's what's important to me as a white woman is actually that I see diversity in brands. I don't need to see me. I don't need to see me, but I need to see that a brand is not just kind of talking about this, which I think is what really erodes trust between consumers. And I think that's really, really played out in the fashion and beauty industry I've seen over the last 5 years, is that as this topic has become really high on the agenda, and as we are investing more in this area, and as we're understanding it more, and as we're talking about it more, but if that doesn't translate then into the decisions we're making as a business, whether that's a product line that we then launch that has things that we should never have included in them. These are the points, and I think these are the points that are really important to consumers. And I wanted to then build upon what we were talking about to my next question is why are we still making mistakes is really my question. We have, you know, particularly in North America, had this on our agenda for 15, 20 years, you know, really, and yes, I know we've got more attention more recently, but we still seem to see time and time and again mistakes being made from the industry, whether it's a particular line, whether it's, you know, cultural appropriation. Why do you both think that is?
I think in my mind, there's absolutely no reason why those mistakes should happen now. You know, there's no excuse. We have been talking about diversity and inclusion for a very, very long time. And, you know, where we are today, there should be no reason for those mistakes happening. There's enough education out there. There's enough support out there. There's enough kind of activism as well from the consumer that they demand this. They want that change to happen. And I think brands need to be bold. They need to be brave in that kind of offering that they're giving through their marketing, or whether it's through the products or services that they offer. And there should be absolutely no excuse for making mistakes. There is a wealth of information and support out there that they can tap into to get kind of the right experts around the table to help them build their brand offering, or their service offering, or their product offering. And I think, you know, the way that we come out and we sort of push that out, you know, is it needs to be right first time. And so you have to have the right people around the table helping you, engaging with you, to build the offering right from the beginning and listen to the consumer. You know, the consumer now really wants to see purpose in a brand. You know, they really want to see that the brand is more than just kind of building a product or launching a service offering and making money from it. They want to see the kind of human connection around it. They want to see kind of, you know, what is that brand going to allow me to be a part of? Is it a part of my thinking and my kind of my sort of activism that I would want to support out there? You know, that's what I'm looking for when I'm buying from a brand. And I think for a brand, there's no excuse not to get that right now.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of what Savi's said, you know, I think overall, and it happens in many industries, but, you know, to the point, certainly ours, I just think there's a lack of cultural agility, right? We don't necessarily understand other cultures and other ways in which people, again, have a lived experience. We as a society, we're very isolated. And if you are unaware of other cultures, then yes, you can make mistakes or do something that can offend another culture just out of pure ignorance and lack of awareness. And so I've really always, cautioned people to, yes, you have to be more educated. You have to be more aware. Your circle of friends should be diverse, right? Because that's how you learn about other cultures. I'm not saying you need to go to school for it. I'm not even saying you need to go learn 10 languages. I'm saying in your own personal life, you need to be more culturally aware of what's going on, because that is what you bring to the workplace, right? And so this is not about stifling creativity. I want the creatives to create. I want them to be as expressive, and I don't care what your muse is or where you find your inspiration, but you do have a responsibility to make sure in that creativity, you are not offending anyone, right? And there's a fine line between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation, right? Where you can think or even have the best of intent, but it gets communicated wrong because you didn't identify or touch in with that culture and check in with them and say, hey, am I doing this right? It's as simple as asking a question. And that comes from making sure you have people around you that you can ask that question of. And so, cultural agility is a huge thing. For LVMH, we're a French company headquartered in Paris, and most of our ideals or ideologies are steeped in French culture. But the reality of LVMH as a conglomerate is, we have 160,000 employees globally. Those employees represent over 100 nationalities. I think the median age of our workforce is like 37 years old, and we're 75% female. So we're not a French company, really. We're actually a multinational country that is, if you were to create an LVMH profile in one individual, it's a multinational woman in her mid-30s, right? It's not Bernard Arnault, who's our CEO, right? And so even in that, understanding who we actually are as an organization almost forces us to now look at the world in a more global way, because our workforce is telling us we're no longer who we maybe once were at one point in time.
I think that's such an important point of who we are and understanding who we are as a business. And something else that you were saying there around, actually, it's about asking a question. And I think, whether we're talking about this in terms of an industry making a mistake, whether we're talking about often, a lot of the work that we're doing is when we're looking at inclusion within workplaces, within leaderships, it's because people are afraid to ask the question. It comes back to this point of, that there is ignorance and in terms of the things that we may or may not know, but when we're not asking the question, that's when I think we can be really blindsided, and that's often where we see leadership groups or people that are making decisions going down the wrong track, and actually often the answer is so simple. My next question, taking down a slightly different direction. Fashion is really fast-paced, probably more so than in other industries. How does this speed of work and change kind of impact employees, and the pressure of kind of keeping up from a brand perspective, but also a personal one too?
I'll take a stab at. Yeah, I'll take a stab at this one first. You're right. It's a very hectic industry. We're always at least 1 to 2 seasons ahead of the rest of the world, especially in fashion. And whether you're on the creative side or even the corporate side, it's long days, late nights. I think as employees within this industry, or whatever side of the business you work on, it is something that you kind of become used to after a while. But, especially in the last couple of years, global pandemic and all these other things that have gone on, we've really asked employees to make sure that they're taking time for themselves, right? This factor of burnout in this global pandemic was real. And we stopped going to the office, and you sat in front of your computer at home all day. You checked in early in the morning before you probably normally would have, but under normal working hours. And then you were still going late into the evening because there was no off switch. There was no, I have to commute, or there was no break. And so we did see a lot of our employees, more fatigued, really going through burnout in a real way. And so we really started to prioritize, mental health, mental wellness, definitely in the last year and a half, as a result of the pandemic. And because again, you're working more and you're still actually going through a pandemic, meaning people are sick. You were losing loved ones. There was this dynamic going on where it was some real life health issues taking place in your personal life. And so we really tried to find a balance. I know some of our brands, they had no Zoom Fridays, where there were no meetings on Friday. You could actually just kind of get your work done and then shut down at a reasonable hour. Little things like that, just to really show our employees that we actually do value their mental health and their mental wellness, were things that we kind of really implemented and put in place. We did ramp up our kind of benefits programs internally so that if you did require some extra care or professional help or anything health related for you or your family, that there were services that you could tap into for that. And so, it was something that we recognized early in the pandemic and really tried to focus on.
Thank you. Thank you for
just adding to that point. I would just say, absolutely, you're right, Corey. The last 2-3 years have shown us how differently we need to kind of, as employers, but also, as human beings, sort of prioritize our mental health. We have been through one of the most biggest changes that anybody, has been through as a society. And I think, within fashion, nobody could have understood that this was going to come. I think even as an industry, if I think about me going to work, I work from home most of the time. I'm in, kind of like casual clothes most of the time. And I only dress up. When I say dress up, what I actually mean by that is wear work clothes when I go out into the office now. So even as a fashion industry, the demands from consumers are changing. People are not wearing makeup as much as they used to wear. They're doing more skincare now. They're not wearing the kind of nice work clothes or kind of, the smart dresses and stuff that I used to wear anymore at home. I'm wearing nice shirts because this is the level of what you'll see from me, So I think as an industry, we've had to sort of adapt to that very, very quickly when, all these changes came through the pandemic. And even as kind of, if I think about skincare as well and brands that support those kind of areas, we, as a makeup artist, I've always been using sanitizer as soon as I kind of have a new makeup to do on a client or something. Sanitizers, that there's been an influx of kind of those sort of products on the market now. So I don't think anybody knew that this was going to come and what impact that would have had on us as an industry. And I think also the repercussions that it's had on kind of creatives that work in the industry. Some people have been put out of jobs because they have not been able to kind of get the work, and it's not been safe for them to sort of be in those sort of environments. And I think so the mental health kind of repercussions on that and the support that employers can give, but also just we as humans and individuals can offer our friends or our family or a colleague that we work with. How important is it now to really ask the question that how are you? And really mean how are you, rather than it just being a passing comment when you pick up the phone and you call somebody. So there's lots of kind of impacts, I think, as an industry that we've had around that.
And I think what you're saying there, Sav, is so powerful, that point of when we're asking how are you really? And, I thought you put that so eloquently in terms of actually how the industry has changed as an impact of COVID, but also how that has just impacted one of the real areas around diversity inclusion relating to mental health and the impact of that, but also then how has it potentially changed not just the industry now, but forever. I wanted to come back to some of the things that we were touching on a bit before, but specifically around this point that we talked about from a consumer perspective. We know consumers are really, really expecting brands to be inclusive, to not just have statements around equality, diversity and inclusion, but actually that they follow through right through all of their business processes. What ways have you within your organizations or the industry that you're working with been doing to really accomplish this, to make sure that we're meeting the right expectations for consumers? And what are some of the barriers that your brands may have faced?
Yeah, I think, you're absolutely right. Our consumers are now expecting us to be kind of on the right side of social justice and on any issue, whether it's, racial unrest, civil unrest, inequity or inequalities, gender issues, LGBTQ issues, even sustainability and issues around the environment. There is a expectation that we are doing the right thing as it relates to all of those issues. And loyalty comes with that, or you can alienate a population as well. They will not support your brands if they feel you are not on the right side of those. And so a lot of it is just really communication, right? A lot of LVMH brands have been doing great things for years. We've just never talked about it publicly, so no one knew. Again, like I said, we've done incredible things around gender. But recently being within the last 2 years, when our customers have become a little bit more vocal around this, I would say it did force us to kind of communicate better. And so, Sephora signed the 15% pledge in 2020, saying that they were going to dedicate 15% of their retail shelf space to Black businesses. And that was a direct result of, the Black Lives Matters movement. On our wines and spirits side, Hennessy is definitely, they created two different platforms, one called Unfinished Business, which was to support some of the diverse businesses and communities, whether financial support or growth and development opportunities, to really ensure that those businesses were thriving. Never Stop, Never Settle Society is another campaign that they launched to support Black entrepreneurs as they were growing their businesses. So we've got tons of initiatives across, a variety. The sustainability stuff has been ongoing for at least 20 years within LVMH. Again, it's just stuff we've never actually talked about, especially on our cosmetic side, especially on our perfumery side. Where we source our ingredients, how we source our ingredients, even our wines and spirits and vineyards and distilleries and all of that stuff. All of that is done in an environmentally friendly way. We've just never communicated it. And so it did require us to say, okay, wait a minute, we've got a great story to tell here. We've just never told it. And so, for us, it was actually really more around creating a communication strategy to emote all the things that we were doing, rather than actually having to create a bunch of initiatives. Yes, some of our brands did need to lean into some of this stuff a little bit more, but it was really around communications for us.
It's
As
really
a result of, sorry.
I was just going to say, it's really interesting that you talk about that communication, because just from my perspective as a influencer on social media, part of my journey and the reason why I became that mature influencer talking about makeup and skincare and beauty and how to look good and feel great. I'm a woman in my nearing 50s now, and I didn't see anybody like me who was talking about makeup out there and showing me how to do kind of my makeup for my skin, that allowed me to still be myself. That was part of my journey. And I think, getting onto social media, I always like to use the Spider-Man quote, with great power comes greater responsibility, right? So when you're on that kind of platform, it's almost as if you have to kind of be a voice of good, of all the things that sort of you are, and give yourself permission to really fully kind of put yourself out there. And when you're doing that, you're almost like communicating it out to other people that are following you, that you give them also permission to be who they are and express themselves in the way that they want to express themselves as well. So I think there's it's not just brands who are kind of showcasing that, and it's great to kind of see them celebrating that and giving themselves permission to put themselves out there with all the great work that they're doing. But also as individuals, when we have a public platform, we're putting ourselves out there, we're talking to a consumer, and we're talking to that consumer who is able also to then relate to you and understand that if this person can do it, then maybe I can do it too. And it's communicating that kind of power to them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that piece around the connection and really understanding and trying to create, much more of a two-way dialogue between you and your consumer. And because my follow-up question was, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying around this communication point of being really clear and communicating out to our consumers. But what did you notice as a result of that? Have you seen a change? Have you seen a change in terms of when you look at the data around who your consumer demographics are they changing as a result of being more open about what you're doing in this space? Anything around loyalty? Is there anything that you've seen? And I know we're only a few years in potentially to this, so over time we should have more data points. But in this first phase, have you seen any change in terms of your consumer profiles?
Yeah, I mean, again, for us with Sephora in particular and the 15% pledge, one of the things that we were mindful of was the 15% pledge was only half the issue. Getting diverse products onto the shelf space is only half of the issue. The other half of the issue is that then you have to get a diverse audience to now walk into the store and buy those products, right? Otherwise, the products just sit on the shelf and they won't move. The inventory doesn't move. And so there was a direct correlation with saying, okay, we are intentionally going to be more diverse in the product offering in our retail stores, and how we now attract a more diverse audience to the store. So the marketing had to align with that. And yes, there's definitely been an uptick. And to Sabi's point, especially online, right? There are, Sephora, a lot of our brands, they've tapped into, almost because they had to in the pandemic when the stores were closed, they had to pivot to digital to really figure out how to still move into inventory. So, our TikTok influencers and our YouTube tutorials on how you use makeup require you now to make sure you've got a wide array of people applying the makeup to their skin and doing all of that. And so it was kind of forced marketing because we didn't have the stores open anymore. We had to come up with creative ways online to tap into that. But what it also did, to your point, Joanna, we took that 15% pledge and we took it a step further. So actually 15% of our social media content is also diverse by default now. And so that wasn't a natural thought for us. It wasn't, oh, well, we're also going to now make sure our IG page is diverse more. It was kind of, it was a natural extension of what we were already doing, just because the products themselves required diverse faces and diverse storytelling to kind of promote the brands and marketing. And so as a result of that, we have some products that actually, they sell better online than they do in the store. People will go to Sephora.com and purchase them quicker than they will, because that's the way in which they've consumed it. They've consumed it all online, so then they just go click a button online as well, rather than walking into a store. So it's all connected. And yes, we've seen the results as manifest as a result.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think what you were saying there, Corey, for me, really it resonates. I often get asked the question of how do you ensure that ED&I just becomes the DNA of our business? It informs our business decisions. It's part of, and I often say, take it away from HR, and I can say this because I was a HR director for many, many years, take it away from HR and put it into product. put it into what the core of your business is. And so in the example of, working with a publishing business, and they'd spent years and years and years trying to successfully achieve an ED&I strategy that was embedded across the business. And it wasn't working when it was sitting within HR. As soon as we just flipped it on its head and said, what we are as a publisher, we create content that therefore everything about the way that we create content needs to be diverse, whether we're thinking about our authors, whether we're thinking about what we're publishing, the way we're publishing, the language, everything around that. When they flip that on the head, and they're really in the early stages, only a year on, they've made more progress from a people perspective, i.e. they're now attracting the diverse talent they've wanted to for the last 10 years. And I think exactly the same is in the example that you're giving here in the fashion and beauty. When you actually start to think about diversity and inclusion from this is who we are, this is what we business, whether we're producing wine, whether we're creating beauty products, whether we're a fashion brand, when it's actually about what we're doing, then I think it's much easier to form a people strategy, to form a procurement strategy, to form an operation strategy around ED&I, and it becomes the DNA of it.
It's also that they're all connected, right? Because what you push out into the universe in terms of visuals and storytelling and what people see of your organization, guess what? It impacts who ultimately applies for jobs, right? If I don't see myself reflected in your organization, why would I think I could work there? And so marketing and HR are inextricably linked because I'm storytelling in such a way that either invites people in or alienates people. And so if you think, I say it all the time, to your point, the head of marketing is the best D&I person we've got. The head of procurement is the best D&I person we've got. The head of finance is the best. Like every function within an organization has a responsibility to this work because it is a business imperative. It is not just social justice. It is not just social responsibility. It is not just HR. Every aspect of business has an opportunity to think through how they do business in an inclusive way.
No, absolutely. And I think once you're starting to really get into that, actually you start to see progress and momentum builds at a far greater speed than when it's just within one function. I wanted to ask one last question, and then I can see we've got a couple of questions from our audience. And it's very much around, a lot of the work that we do is around people and behaviours. And so we've talked a lot around kind of brand and marketing here, and perceptions and what we're doing. But ultimately, for me, this is around the way that we are behaving. And so from, in the fashion and beauty industry, the way that we're talking, the way that we're interacting with our customers, with our clients. And again, we've, over the course of the last, many years, lots of stories about people not having a positive experience in a store, racial profiling. And this is ultimately around belief systems, attitudes, behaviours, communication from a staff perspective. I was just wondering if either you could talk to that point. What are the things that we need to be doing to make sure that we're not just talking, but actually the way that we are behaving is one that ensures that whoever walks in, let's give the store as an example, into any of the stores in the LMVH brand has a positive experience regardless of who they are? What have you been doing, Corey, to really focus around that?
Yeah, I mean, it is about action. I'm going to use an HR example because I think we've talked about some of the other things quite a bit, but all of this talk without action, it does nothing, right? It goes nowhere. And so we implemented a goal last year where within the next 5 years, we want representation among our senior leadership to be 30% people of color, because it's not that now. And so maybe about 15 years ago, LVMH had a very similar initiative around gender. Like I said earlier, the workforce was 75% diverse. 75% women, yet women only held about 20% of the senior positions in the organization about 15 years ago. And so they put an initiative in place to increase that. The goal was 50-50 by 2020. They wanted 50% representation of women in senior leadership. And we achieved 50% in North America. Globally, we hit about 45%. So we almost made it. But to move 25 points in 10, 15 years is still impressive, even though we fell short of the goal. And so I said, well, you know what? If we could do it for gender, we can do it across any other dimension of diversity. So we're going to do it for race and ethnicity. And so we have this 30% goal. It's a lofty goal, right? People are like, okay, I get it. You've got this goal. Now what? That's just talk. How do you action it? And so very simply, 2 ways. Any open position you have, make sure you have at least 30% diverse slate of candidates that you're considering for that position before you even start to interview, right? Because once you start to interview, you're already going to start to find your favorites and then diversity starts to fall off, right? So before you interview a single person, make sure you have a 30% diverse slate of candidates. That's an action item. Don't interview unless you've got 30% resumes that are diverse. And so that's external people that are applying. Internally, when it comes time for advancement, promotions, mobility, make sure there's 30% opportunity for diverse people there too. Very 2 actionable items that will help us then achieve this goal. This goal is not something lofty or dreamlike that is unattainable. If you do those 2 action items very concretely, we will achieve this goal in 5 years. And so, it's really about taking all of these concepts of D&I and then turning them into actionable items. And for some people, again, if you're unaware or you have your own bias in the way or whatever the case might be, it might be hard to turn these items to action. But for us, we found ways to really get that done. So that's a simple HR example, but that's one of the things that we've done to really not be performative and not just talk the talk.
Yeah. And you need those things. You need those things of, yes, it's one thing saying this is where we want to get to, but unless we've got tangible ways in which we know how we're going to achieve that. And Savi, I was wondering if you have got any examples of, specifically in the work that you do within the beauty industry, in ways in which you can be role modeling the right types of behaviours, to your point, to make sure the experience of anyone that's coming in, that is having their makeup done, is watching a tutorial. I was wondering if there's any kind of insights or things that you could draw upon.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, it's as a makeup artist, it's my responsibility to have a diverse set and range of different products that are available that cater to a diverse clientele. So, I remember when I first started, many people thought, oh, she's an Indian makeup artist, so she'll do Indian skin really well. And I was like, no, actually, I do all skin. I do men's makeup. I do kind of, makeup backstage. I do it in Paris. I do it in London. I have a diverse range of models that come onto my chair and sit there and I have to cater for them. I have to sort of cater for them. And so, as a makeup artist, you have to make sure that your kit is well stocked up and you can cater for any clientele that sits on your chair. Secondly, as an influencer that's out there on social media, it's about making sure that I'm not just talking about things that are, just for any one sort of sector of a population. It needs to be a broad range of things that I'm talking about. Aside from beauty and makeup, I'm also an ambassador with a baby loss charity. So I talk about life experiences, and that caters to an audience of all different sectors. It's not just based on gender. It's not just based on age. It's all different spectrums of grief. And, everybody goes through grief. So there is a big responsibility that if I'm going to put myself out there on social media, I need to be talking about a wide range of things that cater to different audiences. And then finally, when I specifically think about beauty and makeup as an influencer, I need to be connecting with the brands, and brands need to be also make openings for people like myself to go in and have conversations and say, hey, I have an audience following that is a mature audience and they really want to know about these types of brands and how it can help their skin, how they can look great and good. Can you help me? Can you help me to get the products that you're doing and you're launching out there and that material out there so I can help my audience? it's not necessarily about me as an influencer. It's about helping my audience and making that connection between brand and the end audience. And that's where an influencer can really be powerful.
Thank you, Savi. And I think that point around, as you're saying, when we're interacting, we're not just representing one silo piece, but that breadth of our lived experience, and that's how we form relationships as human beings. And I think sometimes we forget that in the context of work and in the context of thinking around things like marketing and so forth. Exactly the same psychology applies. I'm conscious of time, and we do have a couple of questions, and I just wanted to pick up on one before we round up, and it's related to the beauty industry. And the question is, as we see more fluidity, has the industry learned from these previous events that you've described? I think this was earlier on in our conversation. For example, males more and more are wearing makeup, which looks fabulous, by the way. However, they're adapting female products. So I'm interested in both of your answers to those two questions. Savi, I don't know if you're happy to take that one first.
Yeah, I think there's an obligation on brands kind of, making their products available for different audiences, a diverse range of audiences. I have a 12-year-old who is going into kind of a stage where he has spots, and he's like, Mom, can any of your products help me? Because I don't want these spots. And, I looked through some of my stuff and I was like, actually, there's some things that could help you, but actually let me just go online and just have a look to see if there's something catered specifically for you. And, it was great to see there are brands out there that are catering specifically for that teenage audience market. And they're not doing it just for kind of, gender-based kind of audience populations. They're kind of considering a different range of sort of complex reasons for why, he might need that product, for example. And so as a mum and as a consumer, I was able to go and get him what I needed based on his specific needs. I don't think I would have been able to do that 10, 15 years ago. I think the world has changed and brands have changed, and therefore they are really paying attention to who their consumer audience is. And it's not just kind of like any one set of a younger group market. They're looking at the whole spectrum. And I think what we need to really get clever at is, if brands are doing that, how do we use social media? How do we use marketing? How do we get the right people in there right from the beginning in terms of product development, helping to create all of that and just amplify it even more?
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quickly because, we went through a very similar exercise. We actually did it for our employees in retail. So we took a look at our grooming guidelines at many of our maisons for our employees that work in our boutiques. There's rules on the way the uniform is supposed to look. There's rules on, how you can wear your hair in the office or wear your hair at work when you're representing the brand in one of our boutique stores. And we actually found that a lot of those guidelines were outdated and needed, a fresh set of eyes, to Savi's point, based on the way the world has changed. And so we opened up the uniform so that regardless of your gender, you could wear either the male or female version, depending on your preference. Similarly, we updated the rules so that, our male employees in retail, if they wanted to wear makeup, they could. We changed the rules around what the hairstyle guidelines are because, how do you tell somebody about what their natural hair state is and how you adapt to that? And so all of that, to Savi's point, I don't think we would have made those changes 10, 15 years ago. The world has changed and we've adapted and said, okay, people are showing up to work in different ways and we need to allow for them to show up in their natural state as they want to be, because then we're going to actually get the better version of that person. They'll perform better at work. And by the way, there are customers walking into the store that identify with them more than they identify with anyone else. And so that was a huge exercise for us last year to really take a look at our guidelines on what it takes to be a store employee and say, all right, this has to change. But, great example of, now, yes, men are wearing makeup at work and wearing the woman's uniform and all of that. And so we've allowed space for people to show up and represent as they truly are.
Thank you. And I think that last question was fantastic and a great one to end on. And actually, again, coming back to some of the earlier points that we've touched on, some good examples of actually how you're applying ED&I to the way that you're thinking about how this industry should be making decisions. And this isn't just around representation. This is so much more than that. I wanted to just thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with me today, both Savi and Corey. I really enjoyed the conversation. I know we'll be sharing it. We'll be kind of drawing some insights from some of the conversations that we've had today. So just thank you so much for taking the time and speaking with me today.
Thank you
for having us.